Greetings to you as we come to our second look at the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes, the teacher, Solomon, reflecting with all his wisdom on what the world is and what its purpose is and how we fit, and not finding himself satisfied with the human experience of trying to work all this out. As I said last time, we're not looking at every verse, we're not looking at every chapter. I'm trying to give an overview by way of doing 5 talks on Ecclesiastes. And the second one is focusing on the first part, that is most of chapter 3, Ecclesiastes 3 verses 1 to 15. Let me read that to you, and I'll read it quite slowly. It's very moving and very powerful and very familiar, perhaps. At least the first 8 verses are. Ecclesiastes 3, 1 to 15. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What gain have the workers from their toil? I've seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. He's made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, he's put a sense of past and future into their minds. Yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in all their toil. I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done this so that all should stand in awe before him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already is. And God seeks out what has gone by. Now, the first 8 verses, the Time for Everything poem, one of the best known bits of the Old Testament, often turned into songs and used as a model for poetry, or little quotations taken as titles of novels and all sorts of things. Hugely often quoted and hugely often misunderstood and not entirely easy to understand. Take it simply as a description of very poetic and beautiful, but an enigmatic confusing description of human life, of the human experience. It's full of wonderful things and difficult things. It's full of confusion and contradiction. It's full of great beauty, as the poem itself is. It's eminently quotable and memorable and usable by believers and unbelievers as some sort of description of how things are. But when they understand it and go into the meaning of it, they realize it's not quite how things should be, perhaps. You get songs and particularly folk songs of one sort or another based on this, and somehow jibbing when it comes to a time for war and a time for peace at the end. Can't we just have peace, please? And that's how the modern writer wants to put it. And the same with all the destructive, broken, breaking elements that happen in each line of this poem. A time to kill and a time to heal. Why are they that way round? Why are sometimes the good bits at the front of these lines and sometimes the bad bits at the front? What's going on? There's a pattern to it and a beauty in it. But what it tells us again and again is that the world is damaged. It's self-contradictory. It's broken. It's, as chapter 1 told us, which we looked at last time, it's crooked. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to embrace and a time to refrain. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to love and a time to hate. He's not saying this should be. He's not saying this is the perfect world. He's given us a wonderful, memorable poem, but it describes a world which is, as I've said, self-contradictory. A world that doesn't quite make sense. It's beautifully circular. Everything is complemented by its opposite. It's going a bit deeper into the problem of chapter 1, which is the sun rises and sets again and rises and sets again and just keeps on doing the same old thing. What's the point? And the water keeps going in its cycle from the top of the hills down into the sea and then up again and same again and same again. What's the point? And the wind blows this way today and the opposite way tomorrow. And where's it going? And what's it about? And we simply have our little lives and we pass on. And then there's another generation and then another generation after that. And what's the point? And that's the vanity, the futility, the meaninglessness of life as chapter 1 presents it. Here he's going a little bit deeper. It's not just a circle and a cycle of everything going round and round in circles. Here there's an element of judgment. There's bad stuff here as well as good. There's unpleasantness as well as delight. This is a very strange world. It's not just that something good is happening, the sun rising, and we can have a day, and the sun setting, and we can have a night and sleep and rest, and then the sun rises again, and we know that God's with us. And it's not just a cycle that, with faith, can be seen as a good thing, a blessing. Here, everything good is cancelled out, and everything bad, we're told it belongs. It belongs. There is a time, there is a season to die, or to pluck up, or to kill, or to break down. There is a time for the bad stuff as well as the good stuff in life. It's a different sort of vanity from chapter one, where vanity, empty breath, meaningless, what on earth's going on? Just cycle of repetition. Here we have a very beautifully balanced world, as it seems, with good and evil equally balanced. Is that the meaning of things? Surely, surely not. A beautiful poem, but horrifying in what it's saying. That everything good that you build will be broken down. It'll have a time for that. Everything that you cherish and keep will be thrown away. There'll be a time for that. Oh boy, what's going on? Well, we move on and we find one of the keys to, it's not the answer, but it's the key to understand the problem coming up quite soon. Verse 9, what gain have the workers from their toil? See the business God's given to everyone to be busy with. He's made everything suitable for its time. He's not criticizing God for the way the world is. He's acknowledging this is the way the world is. I don't greatly like it, but God's made this world, and here we are. He's made everything suitable for its time. Verse 11, moreover, he's put a sense of past and future into their minds, yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. That's the verse I'd like us to stick with for a while. He's made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, he's put a sense of past and future into their minds, yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Here we are in this cycle of things. Here we are in this seesaw world of birth and death, and embracing and refraining from embracing. Here we are trapped in a cycle, trapped on a seesaw. What's the problem? Well, the problem is God knows what's going on. God has made everything suitable in its time. And he's put into our minds something which forces us to try to understand what we can't understand. And that's the dilemma of humankind, that we need to understand what we can't understand. He's put a sense of past and future into their minds. Slightly difficult to translate that bit. You may remember from different versions, or you may have one in front of you. He's put eternity into their minds. That is a sense that there is a past and future, a sense that we're not just here now. We're not like the animals, and even the animals sometimes appear to be planning. The squirrels, as they say, squirreling away the nuts and the good things to eat in the winter as if they knew what was coming and were consciously planning it. I suspect that's unconscious rather than conscious, but we have a real sense. We know when the winter will come. We know on our calendars. We know that it might vary from being a very bad winter to a mild winter or something in between. We have a fairly good inkling that the patterns are changing from year to year in our lifetimes. But we can see the past, and we can see, well, we can see something of the past, not fully, not accurately. Historians, if you like reading history books as I do, they're full of disagreements with each other about what actually happened or what such a person thought or their ultimate intentions were. That still isn't clear. You need uh, almost a time machine to find out. History, we know it's there, but it's a bit enigmatic to follow, and the future is impossible to follow. But our minds want to do that. God has put eternity into our minds. That is a sense of the flow of history, and that things aren't exactly as they always have been, and in the future they won't be as they have been. And there's even a sense in our minds that after we've gone, things will continue. And without applying the whole Christian message, there's a sense in our minds that even when we've gone, we might continue in some way. We might not be fully gone. We might return some way or another. There's that sense of eternity or that sense of past and future in our minds, which forces us, if we think at all, to ask these questions. What's the purpose of this? What's the value of this? What will be the long-term benefit of doing this? Benefit for me, benefit for my children, grandchildren? What will be the value of this? Is it of value to try and uh, save money to help children or grandchildren with future education and so on? Is that something worthwhile? So many questions, but we have a sense of wanting to plan for the future. And we have a sense, unless we've given up thinking and reading, which sadly can happen, we have a sense of history and somehow of our part in the flow of history. And we want that to make sense. We need much more teaching about that. And the Old Testament is very, very clear that the people have to teach and the parents have to teach their children the history of where they've come from and of who they are as a people and what their future can be. That's part of the essentials of Jewishness in the Old Testament. And in the Christian world, it should be exactly the same, not just roots going back at least to Abraham and are being engrafted into Israel, as Paul will keep reminding us, but a sense of the future, of, of who we will be in glory when Christ appears. Now, these are big, big questions for the Christian, but the thoughtful Christian will be guided by the past and by what the Bible gives us of the future, and will be interested by this, and will know that we live in a flow of history, which is God's design and plan and purpose. Now, I'm putting a very strong Christian gloss on this. Take that away for a moment and come into the place of Ecclesiastes. God has put in our minds a sense of past and future. That is the ability and the wanting to look back and to look forward and not just to be in a cycle of stuff, but to belong somewhere in a flow which has meaning and has come from and will go to and will ultimately very much mean something. God has put that longing into our hearts, and He's given us the ability to think in that sort of way. And we have words like past, present, and future, which, if most of the animals had language, they wouldn't have those words. I mean, they'd live in the present for the present, full stop, which sadly is how some people do. And a misunderstanding of Ecclesiastes could lead us to think that's all we can do, because as he tells us, when you think of the past and try and make sense, and when you think of the future and try and make sense, you can't. So perhaps all we can do is live in the present and try to enjoy it. He goes deeper than that. That's not just what he means. God has put this sense of past and future, or sense of eternity, into their minds, yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Here's the frustration of life, that God has given us the ability to use words like past, present, and future, and purpose and meaning and intention and flow. God has given us the ability to use words and think like that, yet we can't work out for ourselves where it's all come from and where it's all going. We can't see or fully understand the history. We rely on historians, we can read history books, but we know when we're doing that, we're not getting the full picture. And we can read and sort of rely on either the prophets, if we're believers, or different sorts of futurologists, whether we're believers or not. But it's not fully satisfying because there isn't a clear answer. And even in this world, we can listen to certain sorts of religions or distortions of religion telling us exactly what the future will be like. And it isn't satisfying because it isn't that clear. And we know things aren't that clear. When the Bible talks about the future, it goes into vision language. It gives us pictures and not enough words, and sometimes words and we don't get them, and snatches of future, snatches of praise to God in a new heaven and a new earth, whatever exactly that means. We, even as believers and New Testament as well as Old Testament believers, we can find a frustration because God has put into our minds the longing to understand past, present, and future, the longing to understand, well, history is a sort of academic way of putting it, the longing to understand our place in things and our purpose in things. And that longing is there, and yet we can't do it. We can't find out what God has done from beginning to end. We can't see the whole picture and the whole pattern. There's a lovely verse, enigmatic and confusing, but it's clear enough in one way towards the end of Deuteronomy that I go back to regularly, Deuteronomy 29:29. The things that are revealed belong to us and our children forever, is the second half. The first half, the secret things belong to the Lord our God. The secret things belong to the Lord our God, yet the things that are revealed belong to us and our children forever. We can work out a certain amount, and as the people of God through the history of Old Testament and New Testament and today, we can see that God is at work. God is working his purpose out. But we can't see all of it. There's plenty of it hidden away, and our inquiring minds and the minds he's given us, something which makes us in the image of God, the mind that can take in a great deal, isn't satisfied because not everything is revealed to us, and not everything is discoverable by us. I mean, I love science, and many of you will know when I first went to university was studying science. I love all things scientific, and yet it is perfectly clear to the very best scientists, that all they can do is describe certain things about the world. They can measure and they can analyze and they can take it apart and see what it's made of, and they can build clever things and all that. But understanding the purpose, that that's a bit beyond. Great, incredible discoveries still to be made under our seas and in the universe and inside our own brains. More of the work of science still to be done, undoubtedly, vast amounts still to learn that we can learn. But the big questions, why and how and what for and what next? They're the secret things that belong to the Lord our God, and our minds want to know them. And that's part of the frustration that the teacher feels in Ecclesiastes. And he goes on to open that up a little bit. Verse 12, I know that there's nothing better for them, people, than to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in all their toil. In other words, if you want to be happy, just get on with life and don't think too much about this stuff. And that is a good solution for many people. Verse 14, I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done this so that all should stand in awe before him. We're in a world of frustration, and how do we deal with that? How do we deal with the fact that we don't understand? Well, stand in awe before God. Here's what we need to do: acknowledge our ignorance. He's given us the ability to know that there's past and there's future and that there's purpose in it all, and we can't make sense of it all in the depth we might want to. What should we do? Stand in awe before him. That's why he's left something secret that we can't understand. That's why he's given us minds that can ask these questions. And where does it leave us? Well, it could leave us mighty frustrated, or it could leave us angry, or it could leave us arrogant, pretending we can and will understand everything. Or it could leave us to say, ultimately, everything is meaningless. Or we could stand in awe before God and say he is wonderful and he is unsearchable and he is so much greater than we ever can be. And so verse 15, that which is already has been, that which is to be already is, and God seeks out what has gone by. Well, yes, there's a circle of water and wind and life and death. Things go round and round. And it's what has been will be again. And what will be has already been. Yes, yes, yes. But God is there. God is seeking out. If we can't find the answers, God can. God is in it all. Our task, well, enjoy what we can enjoy our work and enjoy our food and our drink and our relationships as far as we can. That's God's gift, to take pleasure if we can in our toil. But we won't discover everything. We won't satisfy our minds in the search for ultimate meaning. What we need to do is stand in awe before God, because all things are in his hands. He is the Lord of past and future, and he is our Lord in the present. So we stand in awe of him. Amen.